Hello and good evening. Welcome, members of the Wine Society and esteemed guests. We're delighted that you could make it here this evening for our fine wine collection tasting. My name is Ewan Murray. I'm events manager at the Wine Society, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague Shaun Kiernan. Shaun, who is our fine wine manager, and also in the background, but doing all the tech work, we have Gil. Now, Gil Riggins is also a member of the tastings team. You may hear his voice every now and again, a bit like Graham in Blind Date. He may be coming on just with a few questions that you may wish to put either in the chat or indeed in the Q&A section of Zoom. And then we can gather those questions together. Some we'll answer as we go through, and some we might pile up at the end and do a quick whiz through those as well. So bear with us if we don't get to your question immediately. I don't know what the weather's like where you are. We're in not too sunny and rather drenched Saint Evenage here in the members' room, but certainly what's going on inside the building and wet. Yes, it is very wet, Christian. I'm glad to see it's wet everywhere. We're not on our own. But inside the building and indeed what's inside the glasses in front of us. Hopefully it's going to be a pleasurable evening. This is just one of at least 7 online events that we've got through until the end of the year. More details on that at the end of the session, but we've got 7 currently on the system and a few more in the pipeline as well. So more details about that. A question from Tony, is it going out on YouTube? Unfortunately, it's not going out on YouTube due to technical issues at this end. It will be recorded afterwards, put onto YouTube afterwards, but and we're recording this session, but it's not currently on YouTube, sadly. This is all about the fine wine collection. Now, Shaun, who has been here since time immemorial, I've been here 20 years, and I still feel like the new boy when I'm next to Shaun.
No, I think there's 60 years between us, Ewan.
Blimey, yes, 60
there you go.
60
I
years.
think you were longer than 20 years.
No, 20. It's the. Oh, thanks a lot. But anyway.
Yeah, I've been here forever. You're right.
Yeah, Shaun's pretty much worked in pretty much every department at the Wine Society, but since 2007. I think it's 2007.
2007, we started having a fine wine presence, really, because we had nothing at all apart from a little booklet, an A5 booklet, which just had literally name of the wine and a single wine note, a single line wine note, and that was it, black and white A5, very small. And then I sort of started it all off and introduced the theme idea and put it into A4 and brought it to life.
So is it? I'm just thinking, is it? Did the Wine Society, because the Wine Society, when people think of the Wine Society and they've got kind of the wrong end of the stick, they'll think of us as only fine wine. But it sounds like, if they don't know who the Wine Society are, but it sounds like, we didn't make the most of it beforehand.
Well, it was quite a small part of our business. Most of the business, well, when I joined, 20% of the wines that we sold were bottled here. So we had a bottling wine, and obviously most of them were relatively cheap. We bottled port, we bottled whiskey, we bottled regular French wine. And they were relatively cheap. So we only really started doing fine wine in a big way from 2007.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, we had a little chat about this earlier, and it's a question that we are exercised by as well. What exactly is a fine wine? It's an interesting question. We've got our own definition from just a purely commercial point of view, but maybe it's a bit more. We could be a bit more philosophical about it. I don't know.
Yeah. So internally, I think most fine wines are around over £20, but it's not set in stone because often we list French country wines, for example, which start at sort of £10-12, so relatively cheap. But Burgundy, for example, doesn't start until quite a lot higher. So we sort of roughly use £20, but it's not fixed in stone at all. I'd love to know what members of the Wine Society think the definition is. It'd be quite fun to ask members to put in the chat or in the Q&A, or possibly in the Q&A, their own definition under 20 words. Be great to hear.
There's no prize on this, by the way.
No, but we might read some of them out, which would be quite interesting. So
that would be fun. Yeah. So who is it? Hugh Johnson had it, which I thought he was probably the most succinct. He's always succinct when he writes, anyway. But what did he say that a fine wine was?
So he suggested a fine wine is a wine that you want to talk about. So there's a little prompt, and I always think price is what you pay, but value is what you get. Is one of mine that I sort of use. And I also think that every single bottle that I ever drink has its day, but some bottles stay in the memory for a lot longer. And fine wines, as you know, Ewan, when we've had wow moments with fine wines, they stay in the memory. And you can pick out the wines over your career that you've thought of as sort of fine, but they're just about the memories, aren't they, that they create?
They are. I think from our point of view, it's not just about the wine. It's about who you're with. It's the occasion. It's the emotion that goes with it. Because wine is visceral. It is it brings out. It elicits an emotional response. I find. I mean, there's glugging wine, sure, but there's fine wines. I mean, we were chatting the other day about the examples of things that we remember, and it's I've got a friend who was going through a really difficult time. And he wanted me to go round and just be his punch bag or a shoulder he could lean on and chat. And we were so I brought round a bottle of wine, a really nice wine that I wanted to enjoy. But he was telling me about how about the situation, and it was a really difficult situation he was in. Thankfully, it's been resolved since, but a really difficult situation. And he was pouring his heart out to me, and I said, and I poured the wine out, and he stopped, took a breath, drank the wine, and then thought. And did a real double take, and we started talking about the wine. And we did go back eventually to talk about what the matter
just
at hand.
Puts you in another place,
absolutely,
and makes you think of something much more emotional. I think, so.
The other point that's interesting about where is your? I think everybody's level of fine wine is possibly financially maybe different, or regionally maybe different too. But back in the distant past, before I joined the Wine Society, I worked for Diageo, the world's largest drinks company, who at the time owned the Piat d'Or label.
Oh yeah.
So we were revamping Piat d'Or. We felt that it needed something doing to it to make it a bit more approachable and sell a few more cases.
Not just Je t'adore.
Not Je t'adore le Piat d'Or. Well, it was Les Français adorent le Piat d'Or. It turns out that Les Français had never heard of le Piat d'Or. But anyway, that's another thing. But I think that we did a survey because we were selling about 1.5 million bottles a year, which is not too shabby. But we were selling them to about 600,000 people, which meant that most people were buying only 2 or 3 bottles a year. We just thought this was really weird because they were regular purchasers of this thing. And we asked them the question, why so few? And it turns out that Piat d'Or was a premium wine as far as they were concerned. It was a special treat. They'd take it round to somebody if they were going out for a dinner party, or they'd buy it as a birthday present for somebody.
I remember the classy adverts.
Absolutely. And that's how I remember it. The first wine that I remember seeing in my household that my parents would buy was Piat d'Or, and looking back on it, it was a premium purchase. Thankfully, they're now members of the Wine Society, so it's not an issue.
Mine was Liebfraumilch. That was my introduction to sort of wine, proper wine.
Yeah.
But I do remember my first proper wine at the Wine Society that I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't realise the humble grape could make something like that. And it was 1970 level Lascasse from Magnum. And Derek Gannaway, the old secretary, served it in a tasting in our London office in Bolsover Street. And it just blew me away. And it's something I'll never, ever forget. It was just
your first fine wine.
My first fine wine, it was. But it's just one of those things I'll never ever forget.
I think we've all got an epiphany.
We have,
wine, haven't we? Me, it was Amarone di Valpolicella in a restaurant.
Wonderful.
Never had anything like that before. And it really, really switched me on to the joys of Italian wines. But we could talk about that forever. Before we get on to tasting some of the wines, and hopefully you've poured some out and you've been chilling your whites, etc. From your point of view, Shaun, when we put the fine wine collection together, and it's a quarterly, roughly?
Roughly, yeah, we do 3-4 a year, something like that. So, and they start sort of 6 months before we actually go live.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the process?
So we sit down. I must admit, it's one of my favourite meetings of all, because we sit down and discuss the fine wine collection So next year, for example, we're starting to talk about the March fine wine collection. And so sort of 6 months out, and we spend about 2 hours literally going through the different themes that the buyer and the merchandiser have collected over the year, or all the buyers have contributed into that. And we have a spreadsheet with all the themes in, and it's literally my favorite meeting because we talk about wine. And you know as well as I do, Ewan, we are absolutely, it's a joy working at the Wine Society because we have the ability to buy wine and keep it in the warehouse for as long as we think it's ready. So I have at my fingertips lots of different themes, lots of different wines that I can choose and put themes together, verticals, or it might be a region-based offer, or it might be a grape-based offer, or a single domain-based offer. And so I put all those things together, and we talk about it, and we get a balance of wines and themes to present to marketing manager and say, this is what we're going to do. There are targets there, obviously, that need to be set, but it's a thing of joy when we start talking about it, I have to say.
That's great. So the current collection from which we're tasting, Gil, maybe you'd like to put a couple of slides up just to show members, if they haven't seen the Fine Wine Hub already, what's coming up in our this time. So that's our collection. That's the cover bit. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here we just show we've got a section on Bordeaux and Margot in particular, and then we've got the I'm just looking at there's a chat that's just we've got white Burgundy, I think, have we there?
So we've got a white Burgundy. So we've got a Piedmont section.
Do you want to flick through, Gil, the next one, just to remind us? Yeah, so Piedmont.
Mac Forbes, obviously, and we've got a traditional sparkling method. So some lovely sparkling wines in there if you haven't tried any of those.
So these are the themes that the buyers and you and the merchandisers have come up and said, we've got these wines, let's put them together.
Yeah. And they might be seasonal based, they might be region based, grape based, or whatever. So
cool.
And one of the biggest sections for us in terms of popularity, if you like, is the Small Wonder section, which is £25 and under, which is always, I think, the sweet spot. Nice. For fine wine, and it's proved since 2007. I think, in fact, we introduced it about 2011, 2012. It's proved to be the biggest and most successful section. So it is a shoe-in in every single fine wine list that we have. Small wine.
But it's really that. I mean,
but it's the value.
We're about value for money anyway.
But it's also members who want to explore. Try something different, but it won't cost you a fortune. Yeah. So it really works well. Okay. And of course, the mixed cases in the fine wine collection are critical. I think we probably do about 20% of sales through mixed cases. Members, we think, love mixed cases. I know I do.
If I'm looking at it purely as a member, I mean, this is probably the thing that I look forward to most as the year goes on, the fine wine collections. And it's the mini verticals. It's the sort of thing that no other merchant can do. And I'll stick my sales hat firmly on here. No other merchant can do this. We hold the wines back. We're until they're ready to drink. In fact, sometimes I know that you're really keen to put some wines in the fine wine list, and the buyers are saying, no, hold on to it because I've got another vintage. There's another vintage of this maturing, and once that's mature, we can do a sort of mini vertical of 3 or 6 bottles, and that's what we'll give to members.
I remember going to Marcel Williams and saying, please, can I have the exhibition Gigondas from Saint-Côme? Over and over again. Every year I went back and said, is it ready? Is it ready? And he kept saying, no, you can't have it. No, you can't have it. But eventually we got it, I think, 5 years into its drink date. And it was absolutely what we call à point. So ready and so delicious, and it sold like hotcakes. So they hold on to things until they know they're absolutely hitting their sweet spot, which is great. It's lovely. I mean, it's a bit of an accountant's nightmare, but it's a winemaker's dream. That you have things that are absolutely fully mature. So we're very lucky, very privileged. We know that, and members have voted with their feet because the fine wine list is extremely successful. So
brilliant.
And long may it continue to be so.
Fabulous. Now, in the fine wine collection this year, we mentioned that Mac Forbes, we've got a feature on him. And actually, we've got one of his wines lined up here. So I thought we might actually start tasting now. And there's enough of chat and
yeah. And I'm sure members are thirsty.
Absolutely. And we can come back to any questions that you have as we go along.
Do you want to mention the change of order at this stage?
Yes, I was going to say, because we were talking with Matt, what we're going to do, we just switch the first 2 wines around. So we're going to taste wine number 2, that's Mac Forbes' Gladysdale Village Chardonnay. We're going to taste that first, and then we're going to go on to Bob Oatley's Margaret River Finistere, and then it's the order of the tasting sheet. So hopefully you've got your samples in front of you in a glass. So we're going to start off with Mac Forbes. Mac is a bit of a hero of mine. He's a bit of a hero of the wine societies, to be honest. Yeah. Some of you will be familiar with our range, the Blind Spot, which is an Australian range that comes out seasonally. It changes all the time. There he is, sniffing away at one of his Chardonnays, indeed. It changes all the time. Every season, it's something new. It's something quirky. So we might have a Chardonnay and a Pinot, but equally we've had Riesling, we've had Pinot Gris, we've had we had a sweet wine, a sort of a Rutherglen Muscat, all sorts of things. Mac trawls around the whole of Australia, picking up valuable parcels that otherwise may have got blended away into anonymity, and picks out these wondrous things. And
so we've probably been working with him for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I can't remember when the Blind Spot was launched. It was something probably, but Mac, we've been working since before then with him as well.
Always a pleasure to deal with, isn't it?
Fabulous. I'm really looking forward. I'm off to Australia next Easter, and Mac is definitely on my itinerary. Not too many busman holiday moments in my 3 weeks, but my wife's usually not averse to a wine tasting or two on the way around. Anyway, let's go with wine number 2 first then. This is the Gladysdale. Let me get my notes out. Yeah, it's the Mac Forbes Gladysdale Village Yarra Valley Chardonnay 2021.
Should we just say why we picked the wines we did? Just because.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 Chardonnays here, and all 3 of them are completely different styles. That's why we chose them. So I thought it was a bit of fun to do a compare and contrast in terms of Chardonnay. And they are, when we've tasted them, they are all very different.
We tasted them again this afternoon, and we were really struck, which is why we changed the tasting order. But yeah, and this is a mini highlight of the fine wine collection. Is exactly what we do. We'll have a section on Chardonnay, for example, and we'll give you all these different styles. So Mac is based in the Yarra Valley. This is he's got about 6 or 7 different villages or townships or settlements around him in the Yarra Valley. Yarra Valley is about an hour east of Melbourne. Yeah. And it's being down that far south. It's quite a cool climate area. And there's winds coming off the mountains and heading down the valley towards Melbourne. And it's just a fantastic cool climate area. Mac makes brilliant Pinot and Chardonnay and Riesling in particular in those areas. But this, for me, I think it sees a little bit of oak, but hardly any. You really can't tell. It's really subtle on that front. So for people who don't like Chardonnay, on the pack it says 11.5. It is indeed 11.5% alcohol as well. Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Which is quite amazing. That's what, again, it's that cool climate sort of playing into that. But let's give it a swirl, give it a taste. Let us know what you think. It's really quite restrained on the nose, but then, yeah, a little bit, almost, I get a little bit of tinned apricots and things like that. A little bit of not apricots, tinned grapefruit, but a little bit of tropical fruit. It's really taut and steamy.
Sort of linear.
Yeah.
It's got that really precise, verging on the acidic. Acidic's the wrong word, but it's just really, yeah, I think minerality, I think, is probably the word I'd use.
Mm. Yeah.
Sort of lemon and...
it has got that sort of stoniness. Minerality is a thing that people discuss and say, well, there's no such thing as minerality. But I know exactly what I mean. It's that sort of lick of wet stone kind of there, which for me provides a really good framework to the wines. I'm just having a, it's not.
So it's bright and restrained. I think that's how I described it.
And it's not what we would all imagine as a sunshine-bound Australian Chardonnay. No. It's very different. It's more towards the Chablis end and the precision of that sort of thing.
It's got it's complex, but for me, I think it almost interesting question for you. To decant or not to decant white wines. So this is a wine that I'd probably stick in a decanter. And just see how it evolved over a few hours.
It's going to be interesting to see. I might leave some in my glass now and actually see how it evolves. But yes, and I'm actually quite big on it. I remember my first experience of decanting white wine, Michel Laroche from the eponymous Chablis estate, he was all about decanting his Chablis, and I do agree with you, Maria. It needs shellfish. That would be brilliant. But yeah, absolutely. But it's just we were looking at it and thinking, are you mad? Decanting white wine, what's that about? But he decanted half the bottle. We carried on with the tasting, and then he came back to it half an hour later. And we tasted it, and the difference was phenomenal. This was his premier cru, and he used to go. He had his favourite restaurant in Chablis, Michelin-starred restaurant, and he'd phone the sommelier up in the morning and say, "Can you decant this Grand Cru Chablis for me now?" Knowing that he was going to drink it 12 hours later, and it just opened up and blossomed. So don't be afraid to experiment.
So I often keep a glass in the bottom of a bottle for the next day.
Yeah,
just to see how wines develop, because I mean the wines are well made, so there's no reason why they'd oxidize very quickly.
No.
And I think that's one that would sort of almost fatten up in the glass or fatten up in the decanter. Toby Morrill, the bar of Burgundy, he always says the last glass is always the best for all sorts of reasons. But I think that's because we've just opened it. I think it's still quite restrained and quite taut.
Yeah.
But it's a style that I love, actually, because it's so precise, and I think it works wonders with food.
Yeah, I've got a question actually from Steve. Is it what temperature are you drinking this at? Fridge cool would kill it. Yeah, absolutely. So for me, if you are chilling your wine and you don't have the wherewithal to if you don't have a wine fridge that keeps it at a nice sort of 12.5, 13 degrees, which is probably the ideal temperature for this, to be honest, we had this in the fridge and we took it out, 10 to. So we took it out half an hour ago, and actually it's just about right now. It's beginning to warm up. It's quite warm in this room. Yeah. So I go by the 20-20 rule, that take it out of your fridge 20 minutes before you want to serve it.
Yeah.
If you've got a red wine and it's too warm, then put it in the fridge for 20 minutes before you serve it as well, which just each way, it just takes the edge off the coldness or the warmth. So the 20-20 rule is quite a good one to stick to.
But it's also quite subjective, isn't it? It's how you like your wines often.
It is.
And sometimes I like my reds cool, or I like my whites a little bit warmer.
We find it impossible in the tastings team. We do 150 events in the year on the road, and we always get people who are telling us that our red wines are too cool and our white wines are too warm. Yeah. It is subjective. We try and sort of steer that line down the middle.
But I get it wrong all the time. But it's just about practice. It's about just testing and seeing what you like.
So that's Mac's wine. Mac's he did vintage. He backpacked around Europe at the age of 18 and did vintages in France and Gaillac, and just got a real passion for wine. And he's sort of built it up from there. He's made wine all over the world, and now he's sort of making it in the Yarra Valley and doing a
brilliant job.
Doing an absolutely brilliant job.
I'd love to try this in 5 years' time as well. I'd love to see how it matured.
Yeah, I mean, we're saying 2028 as our
2028. Yeah,
which is kind of
which
our
is
drinking
5 years
window,
time, actually.
Which is 5 years time, and also the wines that you'll know that our drinking windows are notoriously conservative. So we want to make sure that people do. Yeah, probably more than that.
Yeah. But it'd be fun to put some away, wouldn't it?
What I love, we were talking about how restrained it is, and yet it's still there on the finish. There's this wonderful, delicate. And somebody on the chat sort of described it as a citric minerality. Yeah. And I quite like that. It's that real balance between the light citrus fruit and that mineral edge.
Bright lemon.
Yeah. So that's great. Brilliant. Okay, so that's wine number 2, which is the first one we tasted. Now we go back to wine number 1, which is also Australian, but it couldn't be from further away.
It couldn't,
and it couldn't be in style further away.
Margaret River Chardonnay from 2020, from Robert Oatley. When we tasted it earlier, it was worlds away from the Mac Forbes.
Absolutely.
In a really fun way, and it's Australian Chardonnay that I recognise as real Australian Chardonnay, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sort of big, just lick of oak, quite fat, quite just absolutely typical Australian Chardonnay.
Bob Oatley's had all sorts of fingers in all sorts of pies, industrially and commercially, but he was also he pretty much financed the Australia America's Cup entry in 2016, and he did a lot of stuff in a lot of different industries. But wine was something that he was really passionate about. He launched the Rosemount name, if you remember Rosemount. It's still going, but very much the old yellow label with the diamond in the middle of the diamond label. And that was his.
We used to sell those.
Yeah. And then it became sort of ultra branded wine, didn't it? But they had some really fine wines in their Balmoral Shiraz and the Roxburgh Chardonnay and things like that. But he's now Robert is sadly passed away, but his the winemaker that he took on was Larry Cherubino. Larry is one of the most amazing winemakers, not just Australia. He's renowned the world over. But he makes wine as a consultant winemaker in many regions in Australia, and this is one of his. He's the head winemaker of the Robert Oatley company, and this is one of his. Which Finistere Margaret River Chardonnay. Margaret River again is Western Australia. It's about 200 kilometres south of Perth. Cooler, very maritime climate. They're really pretty new actually. You know, 1970s kind of thing, before really 70s, 80s, before one doctor went away and had a hobby. He was a doctor in Perth during the this is Vas Felix. He was a doctor in Perth and a surgeon during the week, and then he'd drive down to this patch of mud with a shack on it, and that was it. And he planted vines, and he was the first person to do it, and worked wonders. And lots of people followed on afterwards, and now it's an amazing boutique winery area. But yeah, Show Reserve Shiraz 2002, yeah, brilliant, still showing well, fantastic. I love it, and that's the thing. The ageability of these wines is brilliant. A lot of people would, I feel like saying that when you talk about Monty Python and the like, a lot of people would poo-poo Australian table wines, but actually, absolutely not. They are fantastic wines and really age-worthy, and this is one of those as well. Let's get to sniffing it and swirling it and tasting it, because we could talk about it forever.
So I think this is very different to when we had it at lunchtime, when we tasted it at lunchtime.
I mean, you can smell the oak. It's a lot more overt.
It is. It's just come out of itself.
Yeah, but then when we had it at lunchtime, we just poured it out, tasted it, and just decided on the tasting order. It's now been,
it was still a bit closed. Wasn't
it's now been open for 40 minutes,
and it's made a massive difference. And it's creamy. I'm a big fan of oak, so I love this style. I think it's really lovely. It's sort of cuddly. It's warming. It's on a wet, windy Wednesday, Stephen. If you're going to have white wine, that's definitely what you need. We've got some more warming reds coming up soon, but no, that is lovely balance.
And it's got
fat,
it's got a warmth to it as well. I mean, I can't remember what the alcohol is on this one. I think is it 14? Is it up that?
I can't remember. Tell you actually. Just
No, well, we've got a bottle. Here's one we prepared earlier. You could probably say, because you can see your sachet.
13 degrees.
13 degrees. So it actually feels warmer than that.
But I think it's got lovely balance actually. It? I mean, you don't sense the alcohol at all, but it's just got that lovely sort of cuddliness. I think is a good description. But it is oaky, and some people might not like that, but I love it. It's buttery. It's sort of slightly brioche, and got a lovely finish. You can still taste it for a few minutes afterwards.
It's got a really nice texture as well. A sort of
nice mouthfeel.
Really lovely mouthfeel, like pithy. You know, sort of inside of a lime kind of thing, because I was talking about slight grapefruitiness of the last one. This one is very much real zesty flavors and a pithiness to the texture, which is it's beautifully in balance, absolutely beautifully in balance.
That's my kind of wine.
Yeah. So for those of you who want the technical details, it's 50% is in new oak, French oak, and then the remainder 25% in 1-year-old and 25% in 2-year-old. So it's got that balance. So it's got the richness from the new oak, but it's not over the top from that point of view, from the oakiness. We're saying 2030. It's got only about 2 grams of residual sugar, so it's pretty much bone dry. It's just lovely and weighty, and again, it's that finish. It just goes
on and on.
Does go on.
So I'd probably drink this on its own rather than with food. I think because I'd just lovely to sit there and enjoy the bottle So I think I'd probably find it quite difficult to match with something. I think if you did, it would be a bigger fish than the first wine. So I think I had flounder down for the first one because it's quite a subtle fish. But whereas I'd have salmon or tuna with something like this.
Yes, the first one kind of.
But I just
Dover sole, Levantine, that
yeah, exactly. Something light and
tuna, swordfish, salmon, a meatier fish.
A meatier fish with this one, but it's lovely, really lovely.
But you can't have the whole bottle because I'm sharing it with you. Here's a question from Robert. Why is wine number 2 more expensive than wine number 1?
There's a question. That's a good question.
A very good question.
Might be yields. Could be yields. Just the way it's made. It might be the amount of it's made. The oak they use. There are a number of factors, aren't there? But
yeah, I mean, I can't remember how much Mac makes of this one, but there are about 17,500 bottles made of the Robert Oatley wine. I suspect Mac, being a smaller operation, there are a lot fewer.
Of the village series.
Of the village series. He does lots of little parcels, and I think yields is definitely something there. If you've got the raw materials are the things that start your cost base there. And if you've got lower yields, but you're still putting as much work into the same area of vineyard, then obviously costs are going to be higher. Oak, I know, I'm not sure about the oaking of Mac's wines here. It's a very light touch, but I suspect the other wine would get a lot more expensive if it was 100% oak as well, 100% new oak. Good question, thank you. And we'll maybe have a little bit of a delve and see if we can come back to you on that one as well. So that's our second wine. Yeah, I could just go back to that again and again. But looking at the first one, it's different on the nose. There's almost it's absolutely broadening out, almost a sort of mintiness to it. And a different texture. It really has come out of itself. It's brilliant. Every sip is different. It's fantastic. So some people say there's no such thing as a bad wine, just a bad bottle. So every now and again you might get something duff, but I just think wine changes. It just evolves as we go along.
But if you had the same bottle over a week, say you had the same bottle every night with different people, different food, I think it would taste different every single night.
Yeah,
that's the fascinating.
And we were saying earlier today, with this rain coming down, the low pressure.
Well, I do believe that
atmospheric conditions.
When the atmospheric conditions are slightly odd, like they are today, when the pressure is low, I think wine tastes differently. Yeah. And I think it's even your mood.
Maybe. Yeah, I was going to say that's probably what it is. Maybe because you're fed up because of the rain.
Well, I think, but actually, this is brightening my mood already. I have to say.
Well, let's brighten it a little further, and let's come. We were talking about the distance between one side of Australia and the other. We're talking about something very different here. You're right. It's the terroir of tasting, Steve. That's a very good way of putting it. And we're going to change terroir completely now because we're going to come the right way up. We're heading to France, and we're going to Burgundy, to one of my favorite Burgundian producers. And this is he is an archetypal small wonder producer, Frédéric Bourrier, from Château de Beauregard. It's a beautifully situated vineyard on the plain, just near Pouilly-Fuissé. There's sort of a little plateau there, and you can see from his winery the two roches.
Is that Vergisson?
Vergisson and Solutré. And you can see the two of them from the winery. You park the car. It's windy. It's really quite cool up there. It's flat, so it's exposed. The wind just whistles across, which means that even in warm weather like you get in the south of Burgundy, there's a coolness and a freshness to that. And you can just look across and you see these two mountains, and you look out to his tasting room. It's just
I've driven past, but I've not been to his.
It's brilliant. It's really atmospheric. The other thing that adds atmospheric, Frédéric he's very international, but he's very French, and he has a fabulous collection of Citroën DX cars, which is brilliant. I remember driving through his vineyards in one of those cars you know, thinking Day of the Jackal, you know, de Gaulle's cars and his bodyguards and all that sort of thing coming around. Absolutely fabulous. So a lot of fun. He's a very dynamic person, a good friend of the Wine Society. We've been working.
Yeah, he comes over quite often, doesn't he?
Yeah,
those tastings for us.
He does.
He's
he does.
Charming chap. Yeah.
And
his wines have always been so consistent and so brilliant. I'm a big fan, I have to say.
And if we're talking oakiness, then Fred knows everything there is to know about oakiness. I went to visit him with Toby Morrill, and we went into his cellars, and Toby said there's a reason that we're visiting Frederic last, because in Frederic's cellars he has a lot of different barrels. So he's got lots of different lieux-dits or climat or single vineyard plots that he uses. But with each of those, he experiments to find out which oak works best with.
Yeah.
So he has Tronçonnet, he has Allier, he goes Slovenian, he goes Hungarian, he goes American. He just the whole lot. He uses acacia wood, he uses chestnut wood, and he has all of these things. And we went round tasting. You know, we probably tasted wines from about 6 or 7 climat or lieux-dits, but each of them treated in about 5 or 6 different ways. I remember, I think it was 38 wines we tasted in a couple of hours, and just the difference from the plot, but also the difference that the different oaking makes.
So fascinating. If there's one place in the world that I would recommend anyone go to if they want to learn about wine, it's Burgundy, because it's so complicated, but it's so fascinating. You know, you've got this big vineyard, and it's split into sometimes hundreds of different.
And it's only one blinking grape variety.
No, I know. Oh, well,
two. Aligoté as well.
But depending on where you are in the vineyard, you make completely different wine to the guy who's next to the road or on the top of the slope or in a slightly different rock formation.
It is amazing. It's
just incredible, isn't it? When I've been with Toby, a couple of times, it is fascinating.
Absolutely is.
And this is
And this is a million miles away. It is 12,000 miles away.
Don't forget to look at the colour of these, because the colour of this one is completely different to the other two. You've got much more sort of almost richness in the colour. It's more yellow. It sort of looks like it's going to be bigger and fatter somehow, doesn't it? Even just looking at it.
Yeah. Let's have a quick taste. In Fuissé, there is a kind of there are the rocks that I was talking about. There's a lovely kind of almost like amphitheatre they call the Cirque de Fuissé, which really gets the sunlight, like a bit of a suntrap. And this wine, the Vignes Blanches, is kind of on the edge of that, and you can get a brilliant view of that and of the hills from just standing in the Vignes Blanches vineyard. Only it's less than a hectare. It's only a couple of acres.
It's tiny, isn't it? As most of the Burgundy.
They are these tiny little plots, but it's 40 years old, the vines, so they're in their prime, if you like. In Australia, that would be, or New Zealand, that would be classed as old vines, whereas 40 years is absolutely right in the middle. It's kind of average.
But ripe and ample is the description of this wine. I think that's absolutely spot on. And there's sort of a hint of creaminess there. More cuddly than taut, I put. And I think it is. It's like a little sort of white wine blanket, isn't it? That sort of, lovely mouthfeel.
And again, having been open for half an hour compared to how we did it before, there's a real, you're right, cuddly
Well, it's sort of richness but freshness.
Yeah. And the wood is different to in the Oatley. It's just as textured, but you almost feel like the wine is sinking in through the wood a little bit more. So it's just that a little bit more integrated. I mean, it's
lovely balance. It's got great acidity, but it's got bags of flavour and that lovely length again. Hints of creaminess. Yeah, I really like that. I'm big fan.
Yeah,
big fan.
Yeah, no, Fred, he's great. Good friend of ours. I love the way he says, he's got all these plots, he's got all these wines. He makes wines in Beaujolais as well, because the family was originally from Beaujolais, and he's right on the edge. If you go about 10 kilometers south, you're in Beaujolais, and he makes wonderful fleury, the fleury, the Poncier, and everything, which is brilliant. But and so you ask him, he said, Fred, I mean, how can you do all this? You've got all these plots, you've got all these barrels, you've got all these things going on. You do your domain wines, the Chateau de Beauregard, but you also do the Bourrier wines, so the ones where you buy in grapes and you blend them. How do you do it all? He says, how did he say it? Let me read this correctly. Je suis passionné, pas stressé.
Yeah.
He loves the job so much. He never finds it a stress and a strain because he's just always wanted to go and find out and innovate that a little bit more.
He is massively passionate.
He is.
I mean, as most of them are, but he's.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's an aura about Frederic which really pushes that. Great. So there's our 3 Chardonnays, and I'm sure you'll agree, 3 Chardonnays that couldn't be different, more different one from the other.
Yeah, stylistically they're just so different.
Yeah.
But all lovely in their own way, and I think all would go with different foods. I always like to try and match things with wine, and I think stronger fish with the last 2. Fish pie with the last one.
Fish pie with the last
creamy
one.
Fish pie.
Yeah, or if you're going to have a white wine with some roast, just good old roast chicken.
Yeah. Whereas the first one, something more subtle, I think, with the Mac Forbes. But all very different. Yeah,
maybe if you go aperitif, starter, mains. I don't know, or just, but they equally they're all delicious on their own as well. Fabulous. Good. Well, that's our white wines. So I'm going to push these white wines to the back. Come back to them later again because it's going to be really interesting to see how they develop, and I'd encourage you to do the same. Now we're going to move on to our 3 red wines, and rather than choose a theme, again, these are red wines that are very stylistically very different, Shaun.
Yeah, we picked. I thought it'd be nice to try the claret, and it was exhibition as well, so I thought that's why. And I do love the exhibition wines. We're so lucky to have those relationships with the growers, aren't we? And the first one comes from Chateau Beaumont, which we've been dealing with. Well, I've been tasting Chateau Beaumont for 40 odd years, and it's one of our biggest sellers en primeur. And one of the relationships that goes back a long way with the Wine Society. Yeah. So, and then the Gigondas is sort of relatively new in terms of the relationship. I think Amadou we've been dealing with probably about 10 years, something like that. And then
Rizzi's even
newer. But just very different. And I thought again stylistically, all very different, but all really interesting.
We had a bit of a debate as to how we were actually which order we were going to taste these in. So I gave the order that you've got in the glasses, and Shaun said, well, actually, maybe we'll do this. And then we tasted them at lunchtime just to decide on this. And we thought they're all so different that it really wouldn't matter which order you put them in because they're so vastly different.
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, leaving number 6 till last, although it looks, I mean, you look at the color, you drink them in the opposite. If you're going by color, you drink them in the opposite order. But actually, there's an acidity and a tannin in wine number 6 that probably means that it can be tasted last because it'll affect the other 2 least. But it was pretty close, wasn't it?
It was pretty close.
Yeah. But anyway,
back to the exhibition. Haut-Médoc.
Exhibition Haut-Médoc. So Beaumont have been making this exhibition wine since time immemorial. I mean, I started at the Wine Society in 2004, and we were doing it then from Beaumont, and we've been every vintage since, really. Yeah. I visited 2 or 3 times.
It's always one of the best value clarets we do.
Yeah.
Certainly on primeur, and it's often on the list, and it's just it's always been consistently good and consistently good value.
Yeah. What's not being consistent is my original tasting note on your notes, because I think I put the one up for the previous vintage, the 2017. So this one's 50p more.
Because the 18 was a better vintage.
The 18 was definitely a better vintage, and it really it's got this warmth and chocolatiness to it, or it did have earlier on when we had it straight out of the sachet.
So for me, it's archetypal claret. When you smell it, I think I might be able to spot it in a blind tasting, because it's got that lovely cedary, savoury nose. But when we tasted it at lunchtime, it was like, oh my god!
Yeah, it's like coming home. Yeah. But it's just beautiful. I mean, it's got that. Yeah, it's almost like smelling a sort of bar of fruit and nut.
Yeah, that's a good description.
Because it is. There's just that fruitiness, a slight nuttiness, sort of like
a spiciness,
tiny savoury edge to it as well. And it's just a lovely colour. I mean, you just want to dive straight in.
And it's got lovely concentration. It's got lovely fruit. There's a little bit of creaminess there. It's quite young, I think. The people agree with me, it's quite young, but so I think it'll last quite happily for another 7 or 8 years, something like that, easily.
Easy.
And actually probably get better over the next 2 or 3 years, I think. Was it 5 years old now? So it's starting to hit its stride, but really lovely.
They're very open, but incidentally, they're very open to having visitors. They've got a lovely, I was going to say new, it was new when I last visited in 2017, 2018. It was a new visitor centre with a tasting room with a glorious view over the vineyards. But they also they run the chateau itself like a B&B. So you can go in. It's not the swankiest of hotels, but it's comfortable. And I always like just looking at the label and said, I've stayed in that room, and that room, as you point to the chateau. I've been there, done that. But it's it's a lovely base because you're right in the heart of the Haut-Médoc in Cussac, not too far from the ferry across to the other side of the Gironde. And you've got Saint-Julien literally about 1.5 kilometers north. They're actually owned by the same people who own Château Bichevel. They also own the Suntory Japanese whiskey as well. But wonderful property looked after by Anthony Yegg, who's the current winemaker. And it's just a fabulous easygoing visit, and it's a fabulous easygoing wine. Yeah,
whenever I go and visit on Primera, it's always a really nice visit. Actually, they're always charming. They always share back vintages, which is really helpful because you can see, just exactly.
Amanda was saying there that they're currently drinking the 2014.
Lovely vintage,
which is
relatively full, but just really drinking beautifully now. 2015 I'd probably keep a little bit longer. Such a fantastic vintage, but 14, 17 just coming into their own now. Super. And this, I think, I'll probably keep it a little bit longer, but that's a personal thing. So
I think so. And it's a little more powerful. I mean, Bordelais wines from 10 years ago, you're talking 12. I think we're talking 14 and a half.
14.
It's I think that's right, isn't it?
It is. That's it.
14 and a half. So it's
with global warming, it's
absolutely
going in the wrong direction, isn't it?
It's going in the wrong direction from that point of view, but there's a ripeness to it and a fullness that maybe 10, 15 years ago it might have been viewed as a bit austere. I've become more of a claret fan in my time at the Wine Society. I definitely wasn't a claret fan when I started out, but it just, as the wines have got that little bit richer and the like, and winemaking has just got better and better, and the techniques and everything just makes it's really hard to find a bad wine these days. Certainly, and certainly at this level. So that's but no, absolutely delicious.
But pardon my intrusion, gents.
Yes, intrude away.
We have had a couple of questions sort of specific to Chateau Beaumont and this particular wine. The first question from John is, why have exhibition wine rather than just stock the Chateau Beaumont? So I wondered if you wanted to spend just a few moments sort of explaining the process behind exhibition and that sort of selection process and for that wine in particular. But also another question from Alexander, who has just bought a Magnum of the 2011 vintage Beaumont. And was wondering if you've tasted it recently or what you might think that wine will be like now and how it's drinking. So you mentioned a few vintages there, but not the 2011 specifically.
So first question is, so the exhibition wines might not be the first wine of Chateau Beaumont, might be a slightly different blend. It's not always the sort of first wine, if you like. So that sometimes there might be a slight difference in the blend of grape varieties. So he makes it they make it specially for us. So it's not officially Chateau Beaumont. So we can't just release it as that because it might be slightly different. So that's why we're able to put our exhibition label on it. And then the second question, 2011 in Magnum, I would have thought that's absolutely drinking perfectly now. So Magnums tend to mature slightly slower, and our drinking dates, I think, are, as Ewan said, quite slightly conservative. So I would have thought 2011 is a more forward vintage than, say, 9 or 10. Better than 12. So I would have thought in Magnum that would be absolutely lovely now. I haven't tasted it for a while, but it should be really, really good. I probably wouldn't bother to decant it. There might be some sediment in the bottle in the Magnum, but it probably Yeah, drink it
when you
straight out.
and when you reach that bottom, then just put it in the gravy.
Yeah, exactly. Add it to the gravy.
Absolutely. But I think very often, bridesmaid vintages like 2011, when you had 9 and 10, which were just absolutely stonking.
So 9 drinking beautifully all the way along its evolution. 10 a bit more structured. And for me, I think 10 was probably would pit 9.
But you had to wait.
But actually, you had to wait a bit longer. So 11 was pretty good. 12 was slightly less good. 13 less good. 14 better. 15 superb. 16 absolutely superb. So all very different, but all Yeah.
The Magnums are just great, aren't they? They're what do they say? The Magnum is too big for one, but too small to share. I don't know. It's it's very much But no, this is a lovely wine, and it's the sort of this. Oh, I'm just doing it again now. It's changed in the glass. It's really changed. Yeah,
which I love in Clara.
Brilliant. And it's had 14 months in oak, and I think you can tell that as well. There's a structure to it, as well as the depth and the ripeness of fruit, which aids that longevity, doesn't it? Really.
But it's balanced. The
balance is perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
We should probably move on.
We should move on. Let's move on to wine number 5. So we're switching from the Atlantic coast and heading into the Rhone Valley, and the southern Rhone Valley, and the commune of Gigondas. Gigondas, which one of the older Côte-du-Rhône village appellations that has become an appellation. So there are still several places where it says Côte-du-Rhône village, and then it's got the name of the commune and the village. But in 1971, Gigondas got its full appellation contrôlée.
Yeah.
And it's these guys, so Pierre Amadieu, who we've been working with for about 10 years, as you say, but they're the largest vineyard, or the largest property in Gigondas, something like 130 odd hectares, which isn't enormous compared to Bordeaux, but
extremely big compared to Burgundy.
Yes, as we were talking about these sort of 1-2 acre sites in Burgundy, so pretty big.
And the vines are Grenache and Syrah. So I think it's mostly Grenache, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then 20% of Syrah type thing.
But this is just so very different. I mean, the first thing that hit me when I just smelled it was the vibrancy. It is really leaping out of your glass at you. It's just, come on, it's just saying, come on, it's Alice in Wonderland. Come on, drink me.
But it's sort of herby as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just
it's
beautiful.
Got the sense of the garrigue, I think they call it, don't they? All those herby notes down there.
Well, it is, and actually the estate, although it's 137 hectares, it's actually 337 hectares, but only 137 put to vine, and the other is woodland and garrigue. So it really is. If you go down there, it's a pretty baked kind of territory with bushes poking up here and there, quite a sort of reddish, that sort of sandy looking soil. The mountains, the Don de Mirail, behind, and it's just it's beautiful. If you go in the summer, it's baking hot, but the blue skies and the rocks and the green vines, it's just really...
And the smell of the herbs.
The smell of the herbs, and that really does...
The thyme, the laurel and the rosemary, I think, down there, that combination, that Provençal combination of herbs. And it leaps out of the glass as well as... it evokes the place, doesn't it, somehow?
It does. Yeah, the Dentelle de Montmirail is the name of those hills, that ridge and mountain. A lovely view over the top, and the estate's been going since 1929, so reasonably well established. It's not like the families of Bordeaux and Burgundy have been going back hundreds of years, but the Pierre Amadieu, the original founder, set it up then.
And again, these are quite old vines, aren't they? I think 45-year-old vines.
Yeah, no, they're really
French terms
well
average,
established. Yeah,
well established.
Yeah,
and I think polished is the word that I'd use for this one. Actually. I was really surprised when I tasted it, because I hadn't tasted it before, and I was thinking it might be a little bit young, but I thought actually this is Moorish. I just want to have another glass.
There are some wines down in the southern Rhone, which particularly this young are really quite big and heavy and overly wooded, and they're in it deliberately for the long term, maybe, or or maybe they were in it for Parker points at one time, but really. This one, because they're high up, they're on the edge, towards those Dentelle de Montmirail. you know, there is a breeziness up there, a few degrees less.
Well, it gives the wine a
temperature.
freshness.
Absolutely.
It's got concentration and it's got lots of fruit, but it's got that lovely freshness. It's sort of like coolness, if you like.
And that's what it is, because at night time it's cooler up there than maybe lower down towards the village where, you know, it's 1 or 2 degrees, but that just makes all the difference.
Yeah, so it's beautifully balanced. I think actually this Ewan is my wine of the tasting, even though we haven't moved on to the next one. Sorry, but I just, when we tasted them earlier, I just thought this wine was, it surprised me. It was one of those wines I thought, actually, I'd quite like to buy some of this.
Yeah. Well, don't let me stop you.
No, I won't. No, you won't. No. I think it's really lovely, softly textured, lovely polish, and I thought it's got weight, but it's not a heavy weight, if you know what I mean. Spicy and figgy, I thought.
Yeah. No, wonderful texture there. What they're doing at Amadieu now, of course, there is white Gigondas, which isn't an appellation. If you make white wines in Gigondas, it's white Côte d'Or. You don't have the choice.
Yeah.
Or Van der Pels, or whatever you want to call it, Van der Pee. But not Van der Pee, EGP or whatever they call it now. But they are, Amadieu are really pushing for a white.
Yeah.
Because Vaqueras have their own white wine, you know.
Because they do Vaqueras here and Chardonnay.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're pushing for that as well, because that's quite underrated. But here, it's just that weight. You're right. It's not a heavy weight, but it's expansive. It covers the whole palate, and it's absolutely delicious. You know, I could probably bit of game with this, maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd happily sit there and drink the bottle on its own. But yeah, it would work well with.
That's not the first time you said that.
No, it would work well with red meats. It would work well with game.
Yeah.
Go well with a barbecue, I think. Not on a night like this, but yeah, it would just lovely, really lovely. Yeah. The essence of red wine.
I also think, you know, from a vegetarian perspective, because we often eat, not that we are vegetarians, but we often go have a vegetarian meal. For me, a really good vegetable lasagna or something sort of rich and lentil-y as well would go with this, because that lightness. Because with food and wine matching, you're either going with the flow or you're going with contrasts. And, you know, so if you were going with the lightness, you'd maybe go with a ratatouille. But if you go with something a little bit sort of bigger and firm, then this can sail through it and sail over the top as well.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Really lovely.
It's just,
very impressed with that, I have to say.
Really good perfume as well.
2020, a very good vintage.
Yeah. I mean, increasingly with climate change, I mean, you know, temperature-wise, generally a lot of vintages are maybe getting better than they used to be. But the problem is that then the temperature's not a problem. But if it's too hot, then you're going to get hail and you're going to get rain, and that's what's going to affect the vintage. So rather than the overall, you know, the weather rather than the climate is really beginning to affect vintages.
Well, one of the most interesting things for me is in Burgundy, where they have a problem with frost because of global warming, and that's like I can't quite square that, but because the vines are so much more forward.
Yes.
In their development in sort of April, May time, there's a much greater risk of frost.
Yeah.
Affecting the vines because of the forwardness of the vines.
I mean, we know,
It's quite interesting. That's where it can have a really, really marked effect.
And we know the seasons are really all over the place at the moment, as we have discovered this summer.
Well, and Rosie Finn was saying the same thing.
Yes, we had a Rosie Finn from Neudorf in Nelson in New Zealand. Neudorf, as they call it, Neudorf as we correctly call it, we found out. You know, Rosie, her birthday is the 2nd of April, so obviously the vintages are different down there. And harvest always used to start on her birthday. Yeah. They're now finished, and the winery is done and clean and everything.
Every single year.
Yeah.
And it's like 2 weeks earlier.
And you're talking that's just over 30 years. It's just gone back and back and back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So quite worrying. As a native of Scotland and with parents from the Outer Hebrides, I'm personally looking forward to Isle of Lewis Sauvignon Blanc at some stage, but it's not going to happen just yet. So that's our Rhone wine from Pierre Amadieu, and then we come. Now I'm a huge Italophile, so I love this wine. Looking forward to tasting it again now. This is the Rizzi Ricci. It's made exclusively for us. And it's a blend of several different crus, which on the top of my head I can't remember. But when
so there's Nervo Vineyard,
yeah,
Pajore, and Poitou.
Thank you for that. If we bring the slide up, Gil, we can possibly see that one as well now. Yeah, the Gigondas, Steve. I think we said it's something like 80 Syrah, 80 Grenache and 20 Syrah. We're not quite sure what the exact, but it's pretty much that particular for the Rhone wine.
So your pronunciation is better than mine.
So yeah,
Pajore.
we are the Nervo Vineyard, the Pajore Vineyard, and the Beaumont Vineyard. So it's 45 from the Nervo, 45 from the Pajore, and 10% from the Beaumont.
100% Nebbiolo.
Yeah, so Nebbiolo, which is just the king of red wine grapes, in my humble opinion.
In Italy.
Certainly in Italy. Okay, we could argue the toss over this one quite a long time. But this is Barbaresco, which is it's Nebbiolo. It's right next door to Barolo, and yet it's so less well known.
And for that reason, it's great value.
Absolutely.
Because Barolo is starting to get expensive, isn't it?
It is. So we first came across Rizzi because Sebastian was out there, wasn't he? And we went and he decided, he tasted his wines and thought it was so good that actually for one vintage it went straight into in an exhibition label. We did the Society's exhibition of Barbaresco.
Yeah.
And this was from
2015, I think.
Yeah, so 15 or 16, 15. Yeah,
so I went out with Sebastian and visited Rizzi.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And it's just brilliant. He's got all these different crus, tiny little plots. I mean, it's a small appellation. It's only about a third of the size of Barolo, which itself isn't an enormous appellation.
Yeah.
But
it's a bit like Burgundy, isn't it? It's the tiny plots.
Yeah, all these little crus. Nebbiolo isn't unlike Pinot Noir in a lot of ways. I mean, it is very unlike Pinot Noir in that it's got loads of tannin and bags of acidity and everything. But it's sort of flavor profile and the way, and it's difficult to grow as well. It can be quite
and sometimes it can take forever to come around as well in terms of be the right time to drink it.
Yeah,
which I always find fascinating.
Yes, I mean we were lucky at the Wine Society in that we do get to go and visit some of these places. I went out with our erstwhile Italian buyer Sebastian Payne. I agree with you, Josh. You say that we say until 2028 on the notes. It's going to go much further.
Agree.
Yeah, definitely. But I was out with Sebastian Payne, and we went to Barolo and Barbaresco. This was quite early on in my time at the Wine Society, about 2006, 2007, and we went out and tasted. I remember it was my first day properly tasting out in the field with the buyers, and we tasted 88 Nebbiolos. And it took my mouth weeks to recover. I have to say, I could hardly talk at the end of the day. It was so anaesthetized. But that evening we went for dinner, and there's a chap whose wife doesn't drink. He does, but he can't drink a whole bottle at once. And he's got this most amazing museum of Nebbiolo wines he's befriended all the winemakers. And because he's got this amazing museum and wants to share the wines, they all bring him along so we were taken out for dinner by Conterno. And no, but it was Conterno. It was Paolo took us out.
Paolo,
they just bring this guy up, or they invite him when they've got special guests because they know he's going to bring some very special bottles. And we were drinking back to 1950s, and it was just amazing because it is one of the most age-worthy grape varieties, Nebbiolo. But so Barbaresco, as we say, and if you look at it, you compare it. It's so light, it's so pale. I mean, I've seen some sort of rosés almost. People who want to make their rosés like a red wine. Sometimes it's about this color, but it belies. You look at the wine, you think, well, I'm not sure about that. But
it's going to be light and insipid.
Absolutely,
it's completely the opposite.
Anything but.
It's elegant. It's sappy. It's always beautifully balanced. I mean, there's tannin there and acidity, but it's just. I mean, I just think it's so elegant. And the fascinating thing about the guy who makes this wine, Enrico Della Piana, I think.
Della Piana,
he hand paints his labels, and.
So just hold that
up
there.
You'll see that. So that line little hedgehogs on the label. He's done that himself, and it's his way of combining art and wine, and he's quite famous for it. And when we were there, he was showing us his magnums, which are like gold dust. But he's got some lovely artwork, and he hand paints and signs all his sign that label. So I mean, it's really beautiful.
There's 35 hectares of vines in this vineyard on this estate. There were 17 of which are planted to Nebbiolo. I'm not sure what else is planted on there. There might be some Freisa, and there might be some of the white wines as well. But
and this is made exclusively for us, I think.
This wine is a particular blend that he makes specifically for us. Sarah goes out there and so it's kind of not an exhibition label, but it's a wine society exclusivity.
Yeah.
But it's just got a lovely perfume on the nose. But then when you sip it, I have to swallow that one. Sorry. It's got this fantastic lightness. It's a paradox because it's elegant and yet it's weighty.
I think that's the acidity, and it sort of cries out for a tomato-based dish, I think.
Yeah.
It cries out for food. But I mean, you can drink it on its own, but I think it would just be a marriage made in heaven with something tomato-based or a good bolognese.
Yeah, no, it would be good.
Ragu.
And this would go really well with sort of wild boar ragu, something like that. So again, the gaminess and then the acidity. It's got the acidity to go with something quite fatty as well. So with lamb, it could be, it could be really good. But it's fabulous. I mean, when you go out to Italy, when you go to Piemonte, the time to go is November, truffle season, because everywhere you go, if you don't enjoy truffles, don't go in November. But everywhere you go, they're grating truffles over absolutely everything: breakfast, dinner, tea, dessert. I mean, I've had it all. Cheese, eggs. I've had it all. But Nebbiolo does go beautifully with that. There's something about the aroma of the truffles and the feel of the Nebbiolo and the flavors, which just goes over.
And it's got such lightness, such elegance.
Yeah,
really lovely, really lovely. But it's just that acidity, which just thinks, actually, I need another glass of that.
This is so you want number 5. This is the one I'm keeping for myself.
Well, I could be turned.
Yeah.
That is lovely, really lovely.
So there we go. There's our tour of this month's fine wine collection, September's fine wine collection. We've got another one coming out before Christmas, November.
We have, yeah.
We have, jolly good.
Yeah, which is the bumper edition.
Yeah.
So 36 pages of fun-packed themes. Probably early November that will go out. So, and there's a printed edition this time, not just online. So look out for that.
Definitely. We've also got, I mentioned there were some events coming up online. We've got, there's a cheese and wine session next Thursday, the 28th. Still not too late to order your cheeses and your wines, so you can have a look on our website for that. We've got a deep dive into Tannat. We'll be talking to Camille Laplace from Château in Madiran, and that's on the 5th of October. We've got our ever popular curry club, a little bit of wine matching with Asian foods. That's on the 27th of October. We've got an ultimate Christmas drinks party workshop on the 6th of December to help you through all those twists and turns of the different styles of Christmas drinks. Sorry, I mentioned the C word in September. Sorry about that. We've got also wines for your Christmas table and on the 15th of December, and then the end of year Wine Society quiz on the 20th of December. We're also working on some other online events that may drop in between then and now. One is a specific Bordeaux tasting where we'll be working with the Bordeaux guys for that. There's a possibility of an Alsace masterclass and also a Madeira masterclass. So keep your eyes peeled because we may be going ahead with that one. And if you want to go and see any of our events in person, we will be in London, Glasgow, Oxford, Nottingham, Edinburgh, Bath, Newcastle, Coventry, Cheltenham, Winchester and Sheffield over the next 8 weeks. So if you ever see me or anybody else in the tastings team looking a little bit wan, pale and exhausted, you'll understand why. But we love it. We wouldn't do anything else. It's great. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. If there are any questions that Gil will have been recorded in the chat, then and we see any that we'll answer. We'll try and answer them in an email that's going to come out to you in the next day or two, along with a link to the recording of this event, and then we can. That means we can. People can carry on buying the samples. We've got a few of those left, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
and we look forward to. Maybe we should do this again
For Christmas.
We could do it for Christmas or certainly next year, and then put some fine wine collections together. Gives you a good idea. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Gil to switch off now and have an excellent continuation. Bonne continuation, as they say in France. Have a good evening, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.